standing up in front of a room full of people and talking about things. But usually when I do that, I'm lecturing on mathematics, which is something that I'm very qualified in and know an awful lot about. And this today is really just my story of walking through science and doubt to faith. I'm no theological scholar. I'm just going to tell you my story. And I've got some slides. And I've got some slides despite something I learned from this chap. This guy called Vint Cerf, who is one of the inventors of the internet. Literally, in 1974, he wrote an academic paper that paved the way for the internet. And he has a connection to this church, actually. This man, who is Google's chief internet evangelist, he's the vice president of Google, he has a painting by a chap called Robert Brain on his wall, and which I discovered when I met him a few years ago. And his title of chief internet evangelist caused him a problem when he visited Russia. And they thought he was an actual evangelist using the internet to proselytise, when in fact he explained, no, it just means I'm head of the Geek Orthodox Church. And he has a saying that power corrupts and PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. But despite this, I've got some slides because they make me feel safe, and because it enables me to show you some Venn diagrams. And to remind you what Venn diagrams are, I'm going to show you my favourite Venn diagram, which is this one. And the main reason I show you this Venn diagram is that it's kind of where I've spent most of my life, really. I have a PhD in pure mathematics. It was entitled Vertex Splitting and Connectivity Augmentation in Hypergraphs. If you would like to talk to me about that, we could do a whole hour, no problem. I'm a professor at the University of Kent, where I'm director of the Division of Computing Engineering and Mathematical Sciences. Before that, for a long time, I was head of 2 schools. And Dean of the Faculty of Science at the University of Reading. And I've spent my life working with physicists and mathematicians and chemists and biologists and meteorologists, computer scientists and engineers. My whole life kind of dripping in science, and everything I see and look at is kind of through a lens of science. But I've also been kind of close to faith for my life. There I am in this Venn diagram, with me sitting just outside the faith circle, you'll note, and this is kind of the beginning of the story. Sitting outside, looking in, and I've always had faith in and around my life, strong role models. I went to a school where we said prayers and sang hymns every day. I went to church parades and services with my mum, who's been a strong and thoughtful Christian all her life. My best friend's mum became a vicar in her 40s. She was one of the sort of early waves of women vicars in the Church of England. My dad became a Christian in the 90s, much to everyone's surprise, including his. Amy, my wife, grew up in a strong Southern Baptist church, and her family, her aunt runs a ministry, has helped thousands of people across America through her ministry. So I've always been close to it, but I've also always had doubts. These doubts float around outside the faith circle. Lots of kind of specific things about the Christian story that kind of, because of my scientific bent and mind, didn't sit well with me. And I'll risk being pretty honest about a couple of things tonight, and I hope that doesn't make people feel uncomfortable. But things like, for instance, the virgin birth. So, now, I completely accept it's within God's power to create a virgin birth. There are plants and animals on Earth that spontaneously conceive through a process called parthenogenesis, and there's no copulation involved, it just happens. And so it's entirely possible that happened, but we can't completely discount the possibility that Mary did something, or had something happen to her that resulted in a pregnancy in the kind of ordinary way. And so, if we were to talk about likelihoods, how likely is it that there was a virgin birth here, or that aspect of the story was a mistake of interpretation, or an enhancement to the story that sort of fit with all sorts of virgin birth stories that go with hero figures across the world, literally. I don't think I'll ever be able to put aside some doubts about this. Or water into wine. Did Jesus turn water into wine? Or did he find some wine? I once got into terrible trouble because I drank a very nice bottle of wine after coming home late one night that my dad hadn't hidden away. So, is it possible that the host for the party hid the wine away and maybe even labelled it water to say, we don't want the guests drinking this? Is it possible? Again, Jesus, perfectly capable, wine, legend, right? It's perfectly possible. But could something else have happened? And as I've said before, I think I'll always carry some doubt that there are some other scenarios that might work. So I'm sitting out here with my doubts. But I'm going to church. I'm going to church mostly because my wife wanted to, which I think there's plenty of people who go to church because their spouse wants to, right? And I'm singing in church. I'm standing at the front and I'm leading worship in church. And thinking, crikey, at some point you've really got to figure this stuff out, right? Because you're singing here singing how great is our God, and if someone really asks you some questions, you might go, I'm not really sure. And you've got to figure that stuff out, right? Our kids were little at the time. They were saying things like, to infinity and beyond. And, well, if they ever asked me what that really meant, right? If they ever asked me, well, why were we going to church? I didn't just want to say, because your mum says so, we're going. Shush, come on. Right? I wanted a better answer than that.
Oh, come on, Dad.
So,
give us the truth.
So I started, well, I committed to doing some work, right? Because you've got to do work in that circumstance. You've got to think things through. So I started reading the Bible, reading books about the Bible, some Tom writes things that accompany the Gospels, exploring ideas about faith, and finding things that I could really revel in, like this passage in Corinthians, for God was pleased to have his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things through his blood shed on the cross. There's a few too many hymns in there for me, although they're allowed and obvious, but for God was pleased to have his fullness dwell in Jesus, and through Jesus to reconcile to himself all things through Jesus' blood shed on the cross. How wonderful is that? Who was Jesus? He was the one in whom God was pleased to have his fullness dwell, regardless of whether he was born of a virgin or turned water into wine. He was the one in whom God was pleased to have his fullness dwell. And the gumption it takes to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And to say, know me, know my Father. I'm the one. And just to know God, to look to Jesus, to know God. Jesus being someone who went towards the poor and the dispossessed and told them that they were valued and loved. And someone who took on leadership as service and responsibility, not power and authority. Know me, know my Father. And then I got a great lesson about what God was from my dad. And this passage at the beginning of John. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The word that has been translated to be word in this passage is a Greek word, logos. And logos is the word from which we get the word logic, and is usually taken to mean the underlying ordering principle of the universe. And so this passage is, in the beginning was the underlying ordering principle of the universe. And the underlying ordering principle of the universe was with God, and the underlying ordering principle of the universe was God. That's a God that a science brain goes, oh, hello. I quite like that. And then, perhaps most importantly of all, there's this passage in Matthew when asked about the commandments, which is the greatest. And Jesus replied, the first is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And the second is love your neighbour as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two. That's Jesus' abiding message to us, that this is the way This is the way to live our best and fullest life. So, essentially, I'm finding all of these things inside the faith circle that make me go, yes, I like that. That's good. But I'm still carrying these doubts. I'm still wondering, if I mention these doubts, what will other people think? You know, my mate's mum was a vicar. Well, if you're not sure about that, then maybe you're not really a Christian. Right? That kind of feeling. And then I found this verse, which was massive for me. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master, servants stand or fall. And they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. This is from Romans, and we spent some time talking about the early church here. And I want to read a bit more of this. So the beginning of Romans 14 goes like this. Accept the one whose faith is weak, without quarrelling over disputable matters. There are disputable matters. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. The one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not. And the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted them. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master's servant stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. One person considers one day more sacred than another, another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. That little passage at the beginning of Romans, what's going on is the church is forming, and Gentiles and Jews are coming together and trying to work out what being faithful, what being holy and sacred means. How does it work? And there's different traditions sort of butting up against one another and trying to work out what do we do about that. And what Paul is saying when he's writing to the churches in Rome is saying, don't argue about disputable matters. Lift each other up. The one who is trying to find their way through, trying to come to Jesus and God, lift them up in the things that they do revel in. Don't argue about the disputable stuff, the small stuff on the side. You know, if Pope Francis and Justin Welby were up here on the stage, that would be really weird. But if they were here on the stage, they wouldn't be arguing about disputable matters. They wouldn't be saying one of you isn't a Christian and the other one is. They might be thinking it quietly in the back of the head, maybe, but they wouldn't be arguing about it. They would be lifting each other up in it. And so, what that kind of really gave to me was the sense that it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. What really matters is what I think. Whether I'm fully convinced in my own mind about faith and God and Jesus. But I'm still left with this, are faith and doubt opposites question. I've still got these doubts, how can I convince myself? So, I got a bit logical about it. And it occurred to me while I was thinking about this that the actual opposite of doubt is certainty, right? Opposite of doubt is certainty. And so the question, are faith and doubt opposites, is actually the same. It's logically equivalent to, and by the way, when I first wrote this talk, I actually wrote this out as a set of logical propositions and equivalencies, and I made a slide with them. And I decided, having done that, it would obscure the message rather than illuminate it, so I kept it out. And I've just left it as saying, our faith and doubt opposites is the same as, are faith and certainty the same? And for lots of people, the answer seems to be yes. Right? There are lots of people who will say things like, you can't pick and choose. Either we accept the entire Bible or we accept none of it. The church Amy grew up in, that we visited a lot, and Amy's smiling, they would tell you that. I mean, this is a strongly held theological position by lots and lots of people worldwide. I remember one Christmas Eve, me and Amy were at the church that she grew up in Atlanta, and before I say anything else, it's an amazing place. It's amazing. They have a sanctuary, traditional church that seats 2,500 people, and they fill it 3 times every Sunday. and they have a sports hall that seats another 2,000 people that they put a rock band in that sound like Coldplay, and they fill that 2 or 3 times on a Sunday, and they have community facilities and sports fields, and they pour love into their community. They do amazing things. If we're in the business of knowing Jesus and making him known, they do it in abundance all over the place. One Christmas Eve, we were in the service and we were listening, and we got about 10 minutes of either we accept the entire thing or we accept none of it. The word is the word, it's the literal word, that's it, there's no room for interpretation. And then, literally a minute later, started talking about the passage in Isaiah 7, where the birth of Jesus is prophesied. And I remember it so clearly. He said, he talks about words being translated and things, and he said that the word that has been translated as virgin is actually a word that can kind of mean virgin or young woman or maiden, but it must have meant virgin, because otherwise what would be special about that? And I nearly came out of my chair to say, hang on a minute, literally a minute ago you said there's no room for interpretation, the word is the word, I think that's it. And then you literally just did the interpretation for us and told us what was the right interpretation. Oh, and by the way, what was special about that? She gave birth to Jesus Christ. That's what was special about that. Anyway, so, sorry, I don't know. The thing is, this is a strongly held theological position by lots, but I also think it's kind of the popular view. If from people outside the church, outside of faith, if you believe in God and Jesus, you must believe all of this. You must have no doubt that Jesus was born of a virgin. You must have no doubt that the earth was formed in 7 24-hour days, and that passage at the beginning of Matthew that does the genealogy of Jesus, and from that you can infer that the world is 6,500 years old. You must have no doubt about that. And while I'm thinking whether I'm fully convinced in my own mind, no, I'm not ever going to be able to say I've got no doubt about that. That it's 7 days and 6,500 years. I'm probably going to say, sorry, I think the universe is about 13.8 billion years old, and the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, and evolution is how he does the creation thing. Did you know? Sorry. Did you know whales have pelvises that aren't connected to the rest of their skeleton? You know, if you go to a natural history museum and look at the whale skeleton, they've got a pelvis that just kind of sits there in the gubbins, not connected to anything. And it's a vestigial trait of when their ancestors had legs. But whales, I promise you, go and look in Oxford, go and look, they've got 2 little bones hanging.
Or just look it up.
Or just look it up, yeah. As Jamie says. So, but when I'm thinking about these things, I think, you know what, this is okay, because the Bible isn't supposed to be a scientific textbook. Now, when it was written, we didn't have physics and chemistry or biology and theology and philosophy. We just had thinkers. We had people who wrote on matters of natural science. And 2,500 years ago, it was a reasonable scientific assumption that somebody must have put man here. We must have done it. But at the same time, it was a reasonable scientific assumption that the sun went round the earth. I mean, you could watch it. You see it go every day. And yet, Galileo came along and some other people and showed that no, the earth goes around the sun. And then Newton came along and figured out that gravity is the thing that makes the earth go around the sun, and this is how gravity works. And then Einstein came along and said, no, it's not quite Newton, you were close, but it's relativity's the thing. Should we do relativity? Yes. Should we do relativity?
Yes, please.
Okay, well done, children. Thank you for showing the adults how it's done. Okay, this is the thought experiment that Einstein did. Okay, so, to start, imagine that I'm on a train and I'm bouncing a ball in the aisle of the train. I'd be really annoying bouncing a ball in the aisle of the train. What does the path of the ball look like to me? It's going up and down.
Up and down.
I'm still, and it's going up and down. Now, all of you are on the platform, watching the train go by, going, oh, there's a bloke batting the ball. What does the path of the ball look like to you? Think about it. Yeah, well done. Well, no, I see. Some people do that. Yeah, that's a bit better. So what's happening is, right, I do that, and in the time it takes for the ball to go down and up, the train has moved forward like this, right? And before the ball's come back to my hand. So what the ball does is the ball goes down and up, and you see the ball zigzagging in front of you, yeah? Okay, here's the kicker. What's the truth of the path of the ball?
It's going up and down.
The truth is in the eye of the beholder. Exactly. Both. Exactly. I mean, if you think it's, well, we're on the platform. So the platform is the solid thing. So that's where it's true. Well, what if you're in a spaceship going past the Earth close to the speed of light with a really big telescope looking down, and what would the path of the ball look like then? Because you'd have to take into account that the Earth is spinning around in a circle, and it's going around the Sun, and the Sun is going around a massive black hole at the centre of the galaxy. The thing that Einstein realised is there is no single truth. The truth of the path of the ball is entirely dependent upon the position and velocity of the observer. Everything is relative. And that's how planets go around each other. That impacts how the solar system works, how the universe works. And what's brilliant is that came out of Einstein's head. He figured that out. So here's the thing. I have this image of the day when Einstein is figuring that out. God is out there looking and goes, yes! You figured it out! Awesome! Now keep going, because it gets weirder. And if you go and look at really small things at the quantum scale, they look way weirder than that. That ability of Einstein to figure that stuff out was a gift from God. He made that happen. My ability to understand it and get overly excited about it, and talk about it with you was a gift from God. He gave me this. It wasn't an accident, he did it on purpose. And I decided I just couldn't accept that God required me to set that gift that he gave me aside in order to have a relationship with him. That would be mad, right? Surely he doesn't require me to lose that. And the Bible, if anything, isn't a scientific textbook. It is the story of how Jesus came to be the one in whom God's fullness dwells and to reconcile to God all things, including me and us, with his blood shed on the cross. If anything, the Bible is a story about how God wants me. He sent Jesus to get me. He knows me, including my doubts. I might have a conversation with Archbishop Justin and say, oh, I'm in, completely. God knows. He still wants me. So, I was just about there at that point. I was like, okay, I think I figured this thing out now. And the couple of sort of final things that sealed the deal. Rob Bell, somewhat controversial American pastor, but he wrote a book called What We Talk About When We Talk About God, and he wrote this. He said, faith and doubt aren't opposites. Doubt is often a sign that your faith has a pulse, that it's alive and well and exploring and searching. Faith and doubt aren't opposites. They are, as it turns out, excellent dance partners. Yeah. Love that. And then, right before I gave this talk in Henley, John Chadwick came to the filling station, and he reminded us, faith is a verb as well as a noun. It's something that you do as well as something that you have. And you see, it's a bit like courage isn't an absence of fear, it's carrying on in spite of the fear. Faith isn't an absence of doubt, it's the thing you do in spite of the doubts. It's the thing you do in spite of the doubts. Which is kind of like love, which I don't think is a coincidence, given what Jesus said was the thing. The thing is to love God and love each other. And I first heard this from an American relationship counsellor, a chap called Joe Bean. And he said, love is both a verb and a noun. When a man says to me, I just don't love my wife anymore, I will say, have you tried loving her? Have you tried just doing something nice for her? Send her some flowers, pay her a compliment, listen to her. And for me, the love of a marriage is the commitment to the doing love, even when the feeling love isn't quite there. You know, those moments when you're looking at the credit card statement and you're saying, oh, do we really need another guitar? It's a good save. My wife just said good save. There's an old joke that goes, when I die, my greatest fear is that my wife will sell my guitars for what I told her they cost. There's the love of a marriage is in those moments you're committing to the doing love thing, even though the feeling love thing is a bit tricky. And for me, the faith of the covenant we make when we commit to God and Jesus is a commitment to be faithful, even in the moments of doubt. To do faith. And that's where I ended up. Basically, the summation of the story is I figured out that the doubt is in there too. And lots of the doubts that I have can sit in there. I haven't got rid of the doubts. I've just resolved that it's okay to carry them. So I came in. I was baptised 10 years ago. And here I am now doing a talk like this. At which point I say, if I was J. John, I would tell you that I've written a book about it, and I've got 50 copies with me that I'm happy to sign. But I'm not J. John, I haven't written a book about it. But after I'd kind of been through all of this, I found this book. I found this book by Gregory Boyd. It's called The Benefit of the Doubt, Breaking the Idol of Certainty. Fighting words, right there. It's a great book, I recommend it to anyone. And he says, faith isn't about striving for certainty, it's about striving to remain faithful in the midst of uncertainty. And so, that's kind of what I wanted to say today. I think the moral of the story is twofold. If you're holding on to certainty and speaking to someone who has some doubts, remember Romans 14. Don't quarrel about disputable matters. Don't question the servant of another master. Lift up anyone seeking to grow in their relationship with God. And if you're harbouring doubts about some aspect of the Christian story, and they're holding you back from exploring the things you do like, don't let them. Keep exploring. The doubts are okay. You just have to figure out a way to carry them. Because it's entirely possible to carry those science-based doubts and revel in the things that Jesus came to teach us. That's what I wanted to say today. I'm very happy to take questions, especially if they're questions about maths. If you want help solving a quadratic equation, I'm your man. Very happy to take questions, either up here like this or down there.
I have a question, but a little girl said to the teacher said to the girl, a whale has got a very small throat. It never swallow a Jonah. And the little girl said, it did swallow a Jonah. And the teacher said, no, it didn't. So the little girl said, the teacher said, when you die, you can ask Jonah. And the little girl said, when I die and I go to heaven, I will ask Jonah. The teacher said, what if Jonah went to hell? And he says, well, then you ask him. Because a lot of people say it's just myth. Yeah. The whale never swallowed Jonah. Yeah. So there's nothing that built in life.
Yeah, and I think I would say, whatever you think about that, I mean, my doubts have got kind of a volume control, so some of them they're kind of turned up to 11, some of them kind of are in the middle, and some of them are way at the end. When I talk about healing is a funny one. My dad had a friend, a chap called Malcolm, whose job was fixing harpsichords for all of the concert venues and orchestras in London. And his not job was he would put his hands close to people who were hurt somehow, who had an injury, and he would sit with them like that for half an hour or an hour, and then he'd do that several times, and they would get better. And it's really peculiar, and people I know very well went to see Malcolm and went back to their doctors, and the doctors would go, "What did you do? How did you do this?" He said, "Well, I went to see Malcolm." And Dad once asked Malcolm, he said, what do you think about Jesus and the healing thing?
Can I say?
Yeah?
When I first went to see Malcolm, I'd ripped my calf muscles on a long hike I was doing to prepare to go to Nepal. And I had 2 months to go, and I actually wasn't going. I really paid for a lot of money to go. Anyway, I was moaning about this at work, and I said, "Go and see Malcolm." I said, "I'm not doing it." I went and saw Malcolm. He doesn't touch, he just put this. I said, "Malcolm," because this was before I got baptized. And I said, "Malcolm, if this requires me to believe in something that you believe in, it's not going to work." He said, "Dear boy," he said, "I can't stop it happening. I know if you can."
and I think when you asked him, "What about Jesus? What do you think about Jesus healing?" He said, "Oh yeah, Jesus, he was good. He was quick. He was quicker than me. He was really good." So kind of, the dial is in a slightly different place on that. And there are other things as well. So I think everybody will take Jonah and the whale, or the flood, or a friend of mine calls the mysteries of the faith. Take those mysteries of the faith in different places. And I think, for me, the vast majority of those fit under the banner of disputable matters. And when set against, this is the guy in whom God was pleased to have his fullness dwell, and taught us, gave us the message that says, love God and love one another. That's it. Do that. Please do that. Oh yeah, I can buy that. I'll be in that all day long. George has a question. Oh my goodness. Go on then, George.
Question as well. What if you look at relatively this way, what happens if you're bouncing the ball, but you're on a rocket ship and it's going up and it's going so fast that you can't bounce the ball anymore?
Then the path of the ball is still dependent on the position of the observer.
You'd be in space and there's no
The thing still holds.
So you wouldn't be able
We'll
to
talk about that much more all evening, probably. Now.
Well, what if the ball
That's your question.
Anyone? That's what question.
Well, no, I was just going to say, Ben, I think you're so right about the doubt thing, because when I first came to Faith, I grew up in it, but I didn't ever come to it for a long, long time. I was talking to Brother Sam, who was a Franciscan brother about this, and he said, your doubts are absolutely normal, absolutely fine. He said, faith will help you. He said, but your doubts will fuel your faith. And it certainly did. It meant I started to read more and do what you've done, and that's what happened to me, basically. And the other thing he said was, I said, what church should I go to? Living in London at the time. He said, I think you should go to St. Martin in the Fields. He said, is that because of the music? I said, is that because of the music? He said, no. He said, they'll accept anyone there. They were right. They was absolutely right. Yeah. I was taking the word for an answer. Wonderful. Yeah. Well.
But isn't that the beauty of doubt makes you curious?
Yeah. And actually, all of science is founded on doubt. Actually, all of science. I mean, Einstein figured it out because he doubted that Newton had the last bit. He said, no, there's something else. There's a little bit more there. I need to... Are you sure that's true? Or it's about asking questions like, well, if that's true, then is this true as well? Let's see if we can make a path to that. So it's all about doubt and asking questions. All of science. And there's kind of this thing that the science is, it's a scientific fact. Well, scientific fact is a concept that's kind of a bit difficult, really, because for ages we thought it was atoms. Atoms are the smallest thing. Well, actually, before that, everything is made of earth, fire, air, and water in different quantities. And gradually we walk our way through to going, well, no, it's atoms. Atoms are it. You want to know, actually, the atoms are made of electrons and protons and neutrons. That's it. They're the smallest thing. Well, no, hang on a minute. The electrons negatively charged, there's a positron, and the protons and neutrons are made of quarks and bosons. And then if you really smash them around, you find this other thing called this Higgs, and it just keeps going. You just unpeel. Like, that's why this image of God sitting there looking and going, yeah, keep going. It gets weirder. You've got the next bit of the onion to unpeel you. Well, look, why don't we stop there?
I have a question.
Oh gosh.
It's Jamie. How many rib cages does a human have? This will make sense in a minute. This will make sense in a minute, trust me.
I think most humans have 12 ribs, Jamie.
Okay, so and this question
Stop.
won't make sense out of it.
I'll turn into Dad in a minute.
So every animal was made like it is now according to the Bible, correct?
Sort of. Keep going.
Except for humans. Because how Eve was made by one of Adam's ribs.
We've got lots to talk about, you and me. We've got lots to talk about. I'm a bit worried you weren't listening to the middle bit of the talk, but we can talk about that some more. We'll talk about that more later.
So does that mean he had one more rib, or he now has one less rib?
I don't know. It's a very good question, and I don't know the answer. I will say, if anybody would like to talk to me one-to-one, rather than ask questions up here, that's fine. We can do that after we've done. Thank you.
Ben. We were actually going to say, if you want to get hold of Ben afterwards, chat with him. We can hang around for a little while. Any questions that you got, collar the man with. They clapped you and said thank you very much. So that was really, really good. Did you want to?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ben. I have to say, I was in tears over there.
Okay.
Your story resonates so well with mine. I grew up in a very strict, conservative Christian family and had all the questions and was never given space to answer them. And then when I finally allowed my space to go through sort of nothing like as deep and scientific and technical and brainy as yours, but a similar sort of journey, God became so much bigger and better and greater and more loving and closer. So yes, thank you so much. That was really good. Thank you.
One of the key things that struck me, just simply, you had it up there on a slide. God wanted to know you. Yeah. And He wants to know each one of us. Personal relationship. Never mind all the theology and all the stuff. Each one of you. With your doubts, with the adventure stories, your past, your history, He wants a relationship with each one of you. And He's big enough to handle you. I really enjoyed that. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Ben. Should we give another round of applause?